Good seats. Look at you guys. Hello, everybody. How you doing? Good? Great. It's nice to hear a response. You're all doing well? Everybody's good? Yeah, okay, good. Glad you're here. Thanks for coming. Welcome to the Poetry Center. We're really pleased to have this reading tonight with Andrew Grace and Susan Nguyen. It's a great gift to have these poets here with us in Tucson, returning to Tucson, both of them. And so we're pleased to have them back in the city and back at the Poetry Center. This reading happens every year at the Poetry Center. We call this our annual Morgan Lucas Schuldt Memorial Reading. Did anybody here know Morgan? Some of you did, yes, good, okay. An incredible poet, an incredible voice who passed away some time ago. And this reading was started with a private donation to help support emerging and innovative poets and to bring those voices into the Poetry Center's reading series every year. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about Morgan so you might know a bit more about him. He's the author of 2 books of poems, Verge and Eros. And those are both from a press called Parlor Press. And both of those are at the Poetry Center if you might like to see them or learn more about Morgan's work, as well as his 3 chapbooks. And those include Other How, a book called Lungage, and a book that's titled As Vanish Especially, Unespecially, As Vanish Unespecially. You're maybe picking up a theme in some of Morgan's interest in his work, which was about playfulness with language. Exploring the possibilities of language, what holds it together, where it threatens to kind of break apart, what happens when you put 2 unlike things together, create new words out of that. And those interests of playfulness, I think, guided a lot of his aesthetic and his work and led to a lot of his interest in the other poets that he tracked and followed that, again, fed back into the work that he was creating. So we do this every year in memory of Morgan and celebrating his work. And again, it's a real pleasure to have these 2 poets here with us tonight, Andy and Susan, to help honor that legacy even further. I want to tell you and pivot now about some upcoming things that are happening at the Poetry Center or in Tucson more broadly. We've had a really great spring season at the Poetry Center so far. How many of you have been to other readings here this spring? Very good. I'm giving you all a high five. There's more coming up, and I want to tell you about them really quickly, but we shift for a bit in March, and so the next big happening at the Poetry Center is on March 7th. We'll have the state finals for the Poetry Out Loud program, so that's Saturday back here at the Poetry Center. That's 1 o'clock. Poetry Out Loud is a program where high school students memorize poems and then recite them. And so this brings the best in the state of Arizona to do that work at the Poetry Center. It's pretty amazing to see high school students reciting poems out loud for you. And so if you're interested in having that awesome experience, that's back here March 7th, 1 o'clock at the Poetry Center. Soon after that, there's something called the Tucson Festival of Books, which has many things happening, and I encourage you to get on their website to see the breadth and depth of all of it. Lots of good poetry things happening, but what I want to particularly plug is the last session on Sunday, 4 o'clock, where the poetry events mostly happen, which is in the Kiva room. We'll have the first reading from Tucson's new poet laureate, which has not yet been named, but will be next week. With an announcement from the mayor. We'll also have a first Tucson reading since she has been named as our new state poet laureate by our governor, Katie Hobbs. And our new Arizona poet laureate is the poet Laura Tohi. And so Laura will be here to read, as well as the new Tucson poet laureate. That's 4 o'clock in the Kiva in the Student Union. I hope you can join us and be a part of that happening. It's amongst many other things happening with lots of excitement at the book festival. There's a new exhibit opening at the Poetry Center, and that's Indigenous Poets from the Rear Book Room. It's a beautiful exhibit. It opens officially on Tuesday, but it is up now. So if you want to come check that out as early as tomorrow, I would be happy for you to see that. And that will be in place throughout the spring season and into the early summer. It's a beautiful exhibit of a lot of really incredible work, and we'll hope you'll spend some time with that if you're at the Poetry Center and want to check it out. We will do readings again, and the next one that's coming up is with the poet Zaina Hashem-Beck, who will be here as our spring poet in residence in collaboration with the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. And that happens on Thursday, March 26th, back in this space at 7 o'clock. And then immediately following that, we have a retreat that's coming from the Indigenous Nations Poets, which will host about 30 emerging Native poets in Southern Arizona. And there'll be events happening, including one that we're just getting up on the website with the poet Natalie Diaz and the writer Leanne Beresemosa Simpson. And that was going to be at Amarant on the Wednesday, April 1. And then 2 readings from the retreat that will be here on April 2nd and April 3rd. So there's a lot coming up and things you can learn about on our website. And we hope you'll take advantage of this and come participate in all of them. We're going to have books for sale after the reading. We'll skip the normal kind of Q&A that sometimes happens, but I know both writers would be happy to talk to you. And those books are for sale on my right at the table with the bookstore. Come buy some books and come meet these poets after the poetry reading. My colleague, Arya Pahari, is going to introduce Susan, who will read second. And I'll just give you some quick context for Arya, who will come up after Andy's done reading. Arya is a poet and an editor who works here at the Poetry Center. So delightfully, if you come, you get to hang out with Arya. And you can find her work in places like the Georgia Review, Waxwing, Inverted Syntax, and Margins, among other places. She's the library specialist here at the Poetry Center, works with our library collections and materials and outreach. She's the only person with special in her title at the Poetry Center, and that's not a mistake. That's legit, and she's the one. So she'll come up and introduce Susan once Andy's done reading. And I have the great pleasure of being able to introduce Andy Grace to you all, who's a really good friend. And when I tell you that he and I were 22-year-olds thinking about poems together more than that many years ago. It was a long time ago now when we were 22. I mean to tell you that we were 22-year-olds who were eagerly thinking about the world that poems make and how to move into that world ourselves and how we could imagine a kind of future that would have poetry in it. And it's been such a huge pleasure to watch all that Andy has accomplished across his 4 books of poems. When you think about poets that have a profound sense of place in their work, something that distinctly holds it or anchors it to a kind of geography, lots of poets come up. You might think of Robert Haas's Central California Coast, or Ofelia Zepeda's amazing sense of the Sonoran and how that makes its way into her words and her work. C.D. Wright's American South, Patricia Smith's Chicago. This is my favorite kind of map, not the one that shows us where the borders are or where the blue highways are or where the bodies of waters exist, but one instead that comes off of a bookshelf that lifts a landscape into lyrics and narrative, and you get a whole new way of thinking about a place beyond its shapes and its edges. Andy's a poet of the Midwest, and his most recent book is called A Brief History of the Midwest. It's the kind of textbook for what might otherwise seem mutually exclusive. How can a place teem with abundance, kind of grow anything, but also become a crisis of faith at the same time? Or how can a place be a place where on one hand you have a fistful of chicory and tiger lilies, and on the other a fistful of fentanyl? Ohio, where Grace makes his home, used to have a license plate that claimed that the state was the heart of it all, the fundamental middle of the country, some kind of core part of the corpus. Grace's work sings of middleness, and not the middleness of unimportance or the thing that you have to endure or get through, which I know sometimes we think about Ohio that way when we're driving through it or flying over it. But I want to encourage you to think of it more in its broadest possibilities, a middleness that connects us to all the other parts of ourselves, an essential piece that by geography and imagination augurs something more essential, a critical way of understanding the whole. Ultimately, I think Grace reminds us that places are made out of language in the end. He reclaims a declarative sentence from the muck of politics and puts it firmly back in the aesthetic realm, often forged in the funk of language shaping where syntax can skip the tracks and veer back towards singing. His spectacular attention to getting the world into words is as fine and original as any poet I know. Buckle up, we're about to land in a cornfield with the power to erase a neighbor's house off the face of the earth all August long. Grace teaches at Kenyon College in Ohio, and A Brief History of the Midwest is his 4th book. Please help me welcome him back to Tucson to read for us.
Thank you, Tyler, for that great introduction. I feel like I've been waiting 20-something years to get introduced by you, and so it's wonderful to actually hear it. Thank you to Tyler. Thank you to Paola for inviting me and for hosting me so graciously. It's wonderful to be here. As Tyler mentioned, this is a former home of mine. I lived here from 2004 to 2006. My wife got her MFA in fiction here at U of A. So I do consider it, while I am deeply Midwestern, I consider this place home as well. I think I'll just start with the title poem of the new collection, A Brief History of the Midwest. This is about one of my favorite weeds of the Midwest, the thistle. A Brief History of the Midwest. History is really the history of thistle. Thistle, Pliny's cure for baldness. A thistle destroyed a Norse army when it pierced the foot of a hidden soldier. Crest of a kingdom, thistle, the endless. Thistle cleaves to sheep the color of nicotine. The farmer knows its language. Common, milk, sow, star, blessed. Prongs of thistles hector the farmer's crotch. The seams of the Midwest are stitched by thistle, and a field of thistle hoards its seeds in its chest until thistledown and finch grift its clutch. Its morning blossoms are pink as raw salt. They are shorn and gathered into a pile to burn. Seeds will spread, borne on carbon to new radii. Thus, the next acreage taken by its thorns. Thistle and ditch become synonymous. The hills lay down their shadows like tarot cards. The history of the Midwest is written in thorn. Tyler warned me that I would dry out easily up here speaking in this desert air, so I'm going to turn. The next poem I want to read is about the most famous billboard in Ohio. I know we have a few native Ohioans. Does anybody know the most famous billboard in Ohio? Rose and Tyler know. What is it? Hell is Real. So this is I-71 between Columbus and Cincinnati. And there's this billboard that's been there for unspoken decades. Bright black background, bright red letters, Hell is Real. And it's become a sort of like cult classic in Central Ohio. I got my PhD at the University of Cincinnati, and they were lean years in terms of me and my newborn daughter and my wife trying to live off of my little my PhD stipend. And my in-laws lived in Columbus, and so visiting the in-laws for a weekend was like this huge respite of help with the baby, going to restaurants, just feeling loved and supported. And then the weekend would end, and you'd have to drive back down to PhD land in Cincinnati, and you'd be driving, and then that billboard would rear its head, and it felt personal. So this is Hell is Real. There is no Jesus enough for Ohio, according to billboards announcing Ohio as simply hell, its river scum made of mid-shucks, its hills of shale. It's all spray-painted, underpass, boxcar, lamb. The billboards publish hell across leaked snow. If only Ohio held a graceful detachment from being Ohio. If only Ohio's Jesus would come back. If only, heaven notwithstanding, there was an Ohio enough. Thanks. This next poem, Tyler mentioned this in the intro. Our area, it's not unique in this way in this country or this world, but we were hit very heavily by the opioid crisis in Knox County. And I read this book called Dreamland by Sam Kunitz, who took as a sort of case study the southern Ohio town of Portsmouth and describes how these sort of pill mill towns got set up and unraveled what were otherwise thriving communities. I would recommend the book. It's grim reading, but I would recommend the book just to sort of understand how we got to where we are. And so I read the book, and then I see some announcement for a community meeting and just in a couple towns over from where I live in Gambier, in Danville, Ohio. And I saw that they were zooming in Sam Kunitz to talk about the book and talk about sort of Ohio's crisis in particular. And so I thought, oh, I read the book. It's only a couple towns over. I'll go to the meeting. And so I go, and there's a discussion with Kunitz, which was really great. But there was also testimonials by Knox County police officers about their experience. And I had never really spoken to police officers outside of like their official duties. And it was very, I found it very evocative. They were clearly very haunted and shaken, and that they were kind of like, I signed up for this job that they were saying like the worst thing we've ever really seen would be like domestic violence, and now we're walking into these houses and there's like 8 bodies that are seemingly deceased but are overdosed and administered Narcan and then revived. But they seemed quite traumatized by the whole thing, which was not the side of trauma that I was used to thinking about the police existing on. So I was thinking about that. And one of my favorite poems to teach is Sylvia Plath's Lady Lazarus, for how extreme it is. So I went to that meeting, and I went home, and I'm grading a stack of papers that I had assigned to my students about Lady Lazarus. So I put those two things together, and it became this poem, Not a Mile. Not a mile from where my students ask me why Sylvia Plath wanted to eat men. 2 men overdose. This is rural Ohio, and the new drugs from Columbus are cut with elephant tranquilizers. The police are nurses now. They don't dream. My students try to understand why the voice in the poem brags about death, but never dies. Not a mile from here, 2 men regain consciousness in their living room full of litter boxes and Optimos. They are not particularly scared by the police or their IVs. They have both died before and been revived with Narcan. It's November 6th, and the sky has been blank for so long, its emptiness has turned supple. The men refuse further medical treatment. One dumps a baggie of crickets into a lizard tank. My students are sincerely trying to analyze death, its cadence and anaphora, its German origins. The police do not know how to speak to my students. They bark and lord over a scuffle or jaywalking because they are used to hauling the dead back to life and fishing names out of their mouths. They cannot help but see everyone as needing to be saved by force. Not a mile from where my students show me outlines of what they are trying to say about resurrection, one of the men pulls a phone out of his mesh shorts and calls Columbus. My students worry they cannot explain where Plath ends and death begins. Not a mile from our classroom, men dissolve like powder in water. Men so close we can't see them. Men like air. And if you know that poem, you know that I stole her ending, the iconic ending. I did want to, just because I don't know the next time I'm going to get to be in Tucson, If there's ever like an occasion for my life to flash before my eyes or a montage made of my life, one of the moments would be in Tucson. I came here in 2004, just proposed to my current wife. Had no prospects when I came here. This sounds so old, but I picked up a telephone and I called Pima Community College and I said, "Hi, I'm Andy Grace. I'm a new poet in town. I would like to teach at your school. Can I?" And from some dumb luck, eventually that phone call led me to Meg Files, who's in attendance tonight. Thank you so much, Meg, for coming. Meg, a great supporter of all things poetry and creative writing, hired me, sort of sight unseen. So I loved teaching at Pima. For some extra money, I also taught. Some of the longer time Tucsonians will remember the mall on Broadway. And it used to have, which the woman who drove me from the airport here is telling me that that's kind of empty at this point. But I used to have a Borders Books, Borders on Broadway. So I worked there part-time. And the whole time we were here, there was this pressure. And I think that if there are younger writers here, there are moments in which you have a thing, but then you need the next thing to happen and the doors are closed. And you're just waiting for that open door. So Meg opened the door for me to be here. So now I needed the next thing, especially since we were going to get married. So it was weighing on me. I was applying for everything. Everything was a no. And I remember this particular day, I was alphabetizing Chilton automotive guides at Borders, like to do home mechanics if you don't want to take your car in. You can fix it yourself. So I'm like, Ford, Mercury, and I'm just thinking, like, what is my life? What am I doing with my life? Why did I propose if I couldn't do my part of like, making money for the family? So I was catastrophizing, and I get this phone call from my wife. And if you've ever worked retail, you know that you can't just like pick up a phone when you're like on the floor. So I was like, I'm just gonna let it go, and if it's important, she'll call back. And she called back immediately. So I was like, okay, something's up. So I asked for a break. I go outside, and I call her, and she's like. When I would apply for things back then, we moved so much that I would just list my mom's contact info for stuff. And so my wife was like, "Hey, your mom just called about a voicemail that she got. Some Irish lady at Stanford is calling about something." And they didn't know what that meant, but I knew what that meant. And it meant that I had got the Wallace Stegner Fellowship, which was like the biggest long shot Hail Mary that I had applied for, the most competitive thing I applied for that I had written off. And so I had this moment of just utter joy, and I look up. I'd been in the box store for so long, I forgot about the outdoors. And I look up, and I see this sunset that I think the desert sky is like uniquely capable of creating, which is like the pinky, salmon, purple, orange. In the Midwest, we have some good ones, but not like what you all have out here. And it was the most epic sunset I'd had the whole 2 years here was in front of me. And I had this news, and there's this landscape. And it was just one of those like inflection points that I think a lot of writers and artists go through, like where you need that open door, the next thing. And so I bring that up just to sort of say thank you to the universe of that moment of me in Tucson. There's like some square of concrete by that defunct mall. It's probably like a Spirit Halloween or something that is like, will always have a piece of me living with it. But I do hope for the young writers that when it's your turn to pray to the gods of the open door, that they listen, and I bet that they will. I think the next poem I want to do is a poem about my mom. My father passed away. He was a farmer, and he passed away on the farm in an accident when I was 25, and so I've spent a lot of my poetry career writing about him, like elegizing him, and I feel like writing has kind of become the way that I talk to him. And so between my two parents, it's a very lopsided pile of poems between my mom and my dad. My mom has always been a steady presence in my life, happy, healthy, working. And so I think I might take her for granted a little bit in terms of writing about her. So when I was going to write this book, I thought, okay, I have to have a poem for my mom. A farm wife has some... you kind of get pressed into service into some ways because farming has no health insurance. And so the wife usually has to have some job that has health insurance. And also it kind of comes along with doing whatever the husband farmer can't, won't do. And so a lot of times I think housewives become accountants. Like they keep the books for the farm, amongst other things. And if a truck driver calls in sick, sometimes you got to drive the truck. And so this is a poem about sort of the ways that my mom filled in the gaps that had to be filled in my childhood. This is Necessity as the Mother. Instead of a knob on the grain truck's gear shift, a wad of paper towel. Instead of a house key, a credit card. My mother kept the books. There was always a bird trapped in the chimney. She and I lifted dead kittens born in an abandoned boat fallen into its keel. There was always some killing to do. My mother made herself into the Picasso of health insurance. Who else? Our fields were full of futures, and we hauled them in. Her father was not the only welder. She cut the tip of her finger off and held us. The house almost burned. I gave away our good sheets to stop bleeding at a wreck on 45. At church, we looked like other families. No one could tell the vastness we tried to explain ourselves to. She arranged our silences, filed them alphabetically. Her husband died. Later that day, her father did too. She balanced the books, remarried, succeeded the losses, invented a life yet untitled. What else, she surely asked the water softener, the Hicks gas propane tank. Nothing else, answered the zeros in her ledger. Each stitches X. Nothing else. I brought two brand new poems that I'm going to make myself be brave to read. I've never shown these to anybody, never sent them out, never read them out loud. I hope that something comes after this book, and I hope that this has something to do with it. This poem is about people that go missing in your life, like not just estranged, but like literally go missing. And so it's about one of my cousins and about a high school friend. And it centers around Dante of the Divine Comedy. The Thorn of Dante. One of the final acts of Dante's life was to place a single thorn into his ear. He was invited to lunch by the Doge in Venice, where he was sent to settle a dispute about salt. The thorn was pulled from the flank of a small baked fish. When the Doge asked Dante why he did this, he explained that this fish is from the Adriatic Sea, in which his father died, so he hoped the thorn had a message to deliver from he who Dante had lost at age 10. By this logic, if I wanted to hear once again from my cousin Karma, missing for half my life, older than the rest of us, but always kind, to whom my parents would not give money when she'd knock on the door at the oddest hour of the oddest day to ask for cash. I'd hold my ear to a dime to hear where she is, if she is still alive. Or to know where Biko is, who the police wanted to turn to salt, so he vanished when we were teenagers, who once told me he was scared of his own gun, that he felt sometimes it could move on its own. Decades later, his brother showed me a wooden wine stopper he claimed Biko had made with his hands and vaguely mentioned Texas. For him, I'd listen deeply to the grain of that wood I imagined he machined while reciting Shakespeare, like he did as we pulled weeds from my father in his fields. The news of the gone is found within what's left, is what Dante wanted to be true before his blood's last turn near the marshes of Camacchio. And this will be my last poem. This is a poem that's so new, the title is handwritten thus far. So at the moment, it's called Cold Pastoral, after On a Grecian Urn by Keats. We'll see how long that lasts. Cold Pastoral. That our farm killed my father is undeniable. I am convinced it killed his brother as well, whose job it was to handle the roundup. He died of brain cancer. What am I to do about this? To sell the land would be revenge, but if I'm honest, I'd rather sell my right eye. I take my girls to the farm on holidays. They search barns for discarded objects, treasures, an ancient telephone, floating minnow bucket, KG Lunavier Bedonvier teacup found on the dirt floor of the pigsty. There is a story there, but no one left to tell it. The adults of my childhood spoke quietly above me, always worried about all of our lives, even though we owned the land as far as the eye could see. Thank you, everyone.
I think I speak for many when I say it's difficult in this day and age to read an entire book of poetry in one sitting. Yet with Susan Nguyen's debut collection, Dear Diaspora, when I looked down, I was on page 1, and when I looked back up, I had finished the book. Susan's poems brought to life a period of time in my own that was quite lonely, that I kept hidden within myself, a childhood of silence, questions, and noticing things I could not explain. Yet it felt like the collection's title alone, Dear Diaspora, was addressed to me, a daughter of immigrants in a majority-white Virginia town, and the poems were telling me, listen, you're not making any of this up because I've been there too. I love how Dear Diaspora opens with questions that probe beneath the surface, like, do you feel safe wrecking language? When did you lose the color green? And introduces us to a character, Susie, who, quote, is not afraid of the dark or the things that move in its current. Susie's observations of her Vietnamese diaspora upbringing in America and the risks and losses it poses for her and her family create an opening within language itself. Susan's more recent poems, which draw their inspiration from her mother's English language learning workbook from the 90s, continue along this thread of curiosity, of noticing and questioning. These new poems bend pre-existing formulaic approaches to language, forging space for what lies beneath: resilience, grief, possibility, defiance, and reinvention. I feel so lucky to have connected with Susan, not only on the page, but off of it as well, and her presence has enriched me, like the best writerly friendships do, as both a poet and a person. Indeed, Susan works diligently to foster community among and uplift the work of poets and writers through her role as senior editor at Hayden's Ferry Review, an international literary journal published by Arizona State University. In addition to her book, Dear Diaspora, which won the Prairie Schooner Book Prize, an Outstanding Achievement Award from the Association of Asian American Studies, a New Mexico-Arizona Book Award, and was a finalist for the Julie Suk Award, Susan's poems have been nominated for Best of the Net and a Pushcart Prize, and have appeared in Poetry Magazine, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, the American Poetry Review, and many other places. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Susan Nguyen.
Thank you, Aria. That was so beautiful. Except you demoted me. I'm the editor-in-chief now. That was wonderful. Thank you so much to the University of Arizona for bringing me and Andrew out. Thank you, Andrew, for the beautiful reading. Excited to spend some time in poetry with you tonight. And also thank you to the students I spoke to earlier this morning. I see some of y'all, so thank you for your questions. So Dear Diaspora, what do I even say? This was my attempt to kind of, come to terms with and interrogate my own familial history. My parents came here, and the rest of my family came here as refugees after the war in Vietnam, between the mid-'70s to '90s. It wasn't something that was really talked about, at least to me growing up, and it was part of my identity I kind of just didn't spend time with, kind of pushed away. And then finally, when I started my MFA, I realized that was where my writing needed to go, right? Where my exploration and interrogation needed to go. And I spent 2 years not doing that, but my last year I was like, all right, it's time. I need to write my thesis, and it's time to get into this. So I interviewed family members, and that was one way into this book. The other way into this book was just writing through a third person, through a character named Susie with an I, who is kind of a fictionalized version of myself. It just gave me more distance to be able to write. And kind of ask some of these questions that I think through first person, I just didn't have enough distance to do. So you'll hear some Susie poems, you'll hear some other poems as well, and I'm hoping to end with some new poems, because you inspired me, so we'll see how that goes. Susie with an I is not afraid of the dark or the things that move in its current. She approaches school like she approaches most things, eyes narrowed, scanning the edges of sight. When she scribbles her name, she dots the I, rubs the sharp graphite onto her finger. Before bed, she says, "Our Father, our Father, our Father, our Father," as fast as she can. The fastest was in Sunday school. Highlighting the Virgin Mary pink, she drowned out the counselor's drone with prayer. Tonight, she turns her blinds inward. Through a tiny sliver, the moon spoils the dark. Dear Diaspora, last night I had the American dream. In the dream, I had an indoor pool. In the dream, I walked my dead dog with a diamond leash. I ate a greasy burger with my perfect hands. I had the most beautiful sex. My skin was smooth, alabaster as the moon. In the morning, everything had changed. There was no pool, only twine for drying clothes. The dead remained dead. My perfect hands held nothing. Nothing was better. So I'm from Virginia. I grew up on the East Coast. So a lot of the poems in this book are about Virginia or just feature some of that landscape. So there's a lot of green. And this poem kind of started in a memory of cicadas. I don't know if y'all have, experienced cicadas. I remember the first time as a kid, they came up from the ground right after 7 years, and I have this memory that I don't know if it's real or not anymore. I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But we all let them crawl all over us at the playground, right? And I remember kids daring each other to eat them. I know, gross. And I honestly can't remember if they did or not, but in my mind, I think we did, so. Cicada summer. The cicadas come from the ground and enter the world in currents, streaming down tree trunks, over branches, across sidewalks and roads, the males pulsing their abdomens, singing for sex. In the field behind the school, Susie and her classmates stand still as dozens climb over their bodies, careful not to crush the winged insects beneath their feet, fearful of littering the ground with broken glass. Susie collects every wing she can find. Each one becomes a small body of water she carries in her pocket, a broken window pane she holds to each eye. She counts dozens more on her way home and imagines how they would taste. Hands in her pockets, touching the wings to each fingertip, she wonders, would they still sing on the way to death, and would it sound any different? Today she walks through uneven fields of green and spits into tall grass, the roots of trees, listens as the clicking of cicadas fills her body with song. The green lacerates her ankles, and she imagines her blood mixed with dirt will nourish, will add to the muscle tremor of the earth. Okay. This next poem I wasn't going to read, but a few students mentioned enjoying it earlier, so I'm going to read Beast Angel. Beast Angel, after Eduardo C. Corral. In sleep, you come to me with a ball of yarn, bind my palms into prayer. From your arm emerges a swarm of bees. You are carried by their sound. Your body shivers with buzzing. I pray for silence, for ecstasy, not knowing its name. You float over fields of needle grass, each toe a quivering arrow through the green of morning. In this light, I open the garden of my body, let loose hunger, let loose the nest of field mice in the coiled snake. In this light, I pray to hold stillness like a gun. Dear Diaspora, does memory eat the body? What is the body whittled down? The eyes as locket, mouth, hinge. Language cannot express all memory, those that are not wholly present, that exist at the edges, so that you only recall in small moments of brilliance, when someone shows you a picture, a place where you were present and your body took up space, acted and moved and was acted upon, and you realize you would never remember your body there if it wasn't for this other, to unlock this small part living in you but separate. How can this be? A fish leaping out of the depths, the well, a moment of light. Orange flame, brief glimmer, a slice. What if memory is the light you swallow? What Susie believes. Eating too much ketchup might turn you pink. Some library books have pages made from recycled toilet paper. Both hands are needed on the steering wheel. The yellow tape measure she finds from her mother's tailoring days is a Burmese python she drapes across her shoulders, a la Britney Spears. The more she thinks about her mother or father dying, the more likely it will happen. God can hear her thinking of sex during Sunday Mass, but not when she prays for a parent's safety at home on the way to and from work. The century egg her mother gives her cannot spoil. The sparrows that fly into H Mart, perched on rafters, cannot leave. Worse than dying is disappearing. I have a very long poem in the middle of my book called The Boat People, so I'm just going to read some sections from it. A lot of this poem is just based off of research I did. I was reading, I interviewed family members. I also read a lot of old newspaper articles between the 70s and 90s after the war. So I was reading a lot of accounts of people, especially refugees trying to come to the US and leave Vietnam on boats. So a lot of this is inspired by that research. The Boat People. She Googles FOB after someone calls her fresh off the boat. She has never been on a boat. What she finds, blank deaths from blank to blank memorials in blank countries. On open water, they traveled on small fishing junks, origami boats, arms and legs folded, one over the other, trawlers smuggling thousands of bodies, searching for international water, living on empty for weeks and months, looking for coastline that did not push back. Vietnamese Boat People Memorial, Asian Garden of Peaceful Eternity. The man and old woman, the young mother and child, frozen in bronze, turned blue-green. 4 figures so soaked, they have become the waterlogged wrinkles of their clothing. 4 figures on the raft, floating in a fountain shaped like the body of a boat, their bodies submerging above water. The young woman's outstretched hand reaching back in time. Around the fountain lay 54 stones, each inscribed with names, a small portion of the dead. Interview number 1. The former boat person stated that as many as 20 ships passed by without stopping and coming to their aid, ignoring their cries for help. When they finally saw shore, the refugees sank the boat with their bodies, pounding their hands and feet so they could not be towed away. The people smugglers speak. They come to us with black market gold, whole life savings, homes sold. They, the soon-to-be defectors. They will say they're going on holiday or nothing at all. They will disappear in the middle of the night, walk through mud and green jungle, reappear in darkest morning. Some commission their own boats built, traveling petri dish of human waste, fever dream. We know men who have tried to leave many times, only to be turned back. Bad weather, bad feeling. They will not give up. They would squander their life, savings 12 times, anything for the chance of freedom, the promise of blue ocean. Can you define a refugee? A refugee seeks refuge. Interview number 6. I did not want to go back. When they took us to the plane, it was over very quick. We owned almost nothing still, after 7 years. The men brought their fists together, desperate. We dragged our feet, refused to walk, threw our bodies against their barricade, were met with water cannon. The men were rolled into blankets, loaded into the cabin like a cigarette in the plane's mouth, a stilled bullet. Vietnamese Boat People Memorial, Captain Burke Park. A mother holds her son's hand. On the other hand, a bird in mid-flight looks at the mother. The boy looks the other way. It is impossible to tell which direction is future, which past. Okay, and I'm going to shift gears and read some newer work. Thanks. So as Aria mentioned, I found my mother's English language workbook from the 90s when she first came to the US, and her notebook and her own notes as well. So I've been playing around and trying to subvert and just experiment with the forms found in those books, and also just thinking of my own relationship to English and Vietnamese, language as a site of connection and dislocation. So I'm going to read a poem about discovering that workbook, and I wanted to read some as well. And I have slides just because they're a visual element, so I just wanted y'all to see some of it, and also I'm a visual person, so. Discovering my mother's English language workbook from the 90s titled Hooray for English. On the cover, a monkey steers a rocket ship. Inside, a blonde astronaut smiles, waved into space by an Asian family who I imagine lassoing the curve of the moon, the hard sea of constellation. I watch my mother's path between past and future tense, waiting for her handwriting to soar, to arrive fully formed and fluent. Outside these pages, I struggled through years of basic Vietnamese. My parents threatened me with language classes, but I was never worried. The Viet Church Far, their work hours long. Those 2 springs, my father drove me to CCD. He stayed in the car while I faked prayers and made the sign of the cross. He read the papers with arms stretched wide, trying to catch all the words. Seat fully reclined, newsprint lettering his dreams. After Mass, I tapped his window gently, afraid to pull him back into this world. The sky poured forth the alphabet. We spelled our futures on the fogged windshield. Inside, on a dark shelf, a different life quivered in my mother's throat. Okay, let's see if this works. So these are just a few excerpts from Hooray for English. Cool. What is your name? I pronounced myself in shed velvet syntax. No, I meant, what do people call you? Refugee. How old are you? I'm several decades old. What is your favorite hobby? If I stand still, I'm afraid I'll fall down. There's nothing you love to do. Love echoes in my throat like a morning glory. I crush it. What do people find most interesting about you? They ask, where are you from? What do you forget most about your home country? I am a bright grammar, trampled berries against the road. Describe your family. My mother didn't want me to marry for 10 years. In secret, I visited my now husband in re-education camp. She worried he'd never be able to escape the country, that I'd never step a foot outside of it. The prayers before the HO program took so long. My now husband tried to sink the ocean. Describe your husband. He wanted to be there when I arrived with my papers. When he got caught again, an animal in the tines of a fork, I still never conceived of another border. I still dreamed of staying. But then what happened? We arrived at a camp in Thailand. I can count my siblings on 2 continents. Some crossed on water. I would do everything for love. Was everyone watching TV when the tanks rolled in? Yes, they were. Was it hard to sleep? No, it wasn't. Were children running in the streets? Yes, they were. Was furniture knocked over? No, it wasn't. Was the phone ringing? Yes, it was. Were the roads jammed? Yes, they were. Was the family together? No, they weren't. Were the clothes on the line? Yes, they were. Present. We go to camp at 7 o'clock. My mother thinks I cook for the neighbor. She walks to the gates. You are a bad daughter. I open my mouth. The neighbor plants melons. Future. We'll go to camp at 7 o'clock. My mother will think I cook for the neighbor. I will pack food the night before. She will walk to the neighbor's gates and look for me. You will be a bad daughter. I will open my mouth and contort. The neighbor will plant melons. I will carry 2 red halves. Past. We went to camp at 7 o'clock. My mother thought I cooked for the neighbor. I handed my love food that won't spoil. She walked to the neighbor's gates and counted the times she did not see me. I was the last daughter. I opened my mouth and contorted when I saw him. The neighbor planted melons. I armed myself with seeds. Describe your childhood. Each morning, I followed the blue-winged bird's flight path between the neighbor's tree and the shine of her gate's latch. During monsoons, the streets flooded, and jeweled cockroaches climbed our legs. We all looked for safety outside of ourselves. Were you close to your siblings? The oldest already walked single file in the fields. What was it like to arrive at camp? Which one? Which one? What was it like to visit your now husband? The second time at the second camp, I went with his sisters. We spent the day before preparing food. My fingers hungered in knots. Okay. And I'm going to end there from this part, from this long poem. And I'm just going to read one more poem that is also new. I've been thinking a lot about desire, so maybe something a little less heavy than what I've been sharing. Okay. Flight path. Today is a good day, the first in a while, and I want to unbutton the sleeves of desire, open all the windows and let April in. It's musty as hell in here. Let the sun take me by the shoulders and kiss the grooves of my collarbones. I'm alive and I have an appetite for longing. So let them all in, the birds, the strays, even the things that buzz in my ear. A fly dizzies past, languid, then promptly forgets the open window. He knocks again and again, louder and louder against the warm glass, looking for escape. God, to make a nuisance of my want until it's all anyone hears. To make my yearning known as I circle a room. I admire this lust for life, so I let him live. I fan him through the window with a dust rag, like I'm waving goodbye to a lover. When I walk by the week-old box of oranges, I cause a commotion. A shadow of fruit flies lifts then disperses. A dead one floats in my glass. The smell of rot sharpens each day, rings of blue mold appearing one by one until whole oranges turn ashen. Let them. Desire is not without casualty. I'm amazed that every insect that finds its way in makes it to water. The silverfish in the sink, the gnat hovering over the dripping faucet. It's a superpower, a heightened nose for that which they cannot live without. I'd be lying if I said I never drowned them. Sometimes I want spectacle. I drop each silver orange down the drain and watch the spores erupt. Thank you.
We have one more big round of applause for Andy and for Susan. Thanks so much for new poems. And let's take Susan's advice and go home and open the windows. I hope to see you back here at the Poetry Center. We have lots of events coming up, like I mentioned. Books are for sale. I know both these poets will be happy to talk to you some more, and especially if you buy a book. But you don't have to. We'll see you again soon at the Poetry Center. Thanks, everybody. Take care.